Welcome to Book Backstory. My name is Carla Brandenburg, and I'm an award-winning author of romantic suspense and paranormal novels. This podcast is a walk along my journey. I plan to interview some of my favorite authors, share with you some of the things that get me excited to write a book, and the stumbling blocks during the process.
Okay, I'm here today with Southern author Maggie Toussaint, who writes cozy and paranormal mysteries, romantic suspense, and dystopian fiction, with more than 20 fiction novels published. A multi-year finalist for Georgia Author of the Year, she's won Silver Falchions, 2 different Reader's Choice Awards, and the Epic Award. She's past president of Mystery Writers of America, Southeast Chapter, and an officer of Low Country Sisters in Crime. She lives in coastal Georgia, where secrets, heritage, and ancient oaks cast long shadows. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you, Carla. It's a pleasure to be here today and to be the inaugural victim on your new series of broadcasting. I'm glad I get to be number one.
Well, I'm really excited to hook up with you again, Maggie. I first met Maggie over at the Book Lovers Bench blog, where I quickly discovered and devoured her Dreamwalker series. At one point in time, she and I both released books relating to the legends of Selkies. So I love how your stories incorporate coastal Georgia. You have a flair for showing that part of the country to your readers. For those who haven't read Maggie's books, she captures the secrets and haunting aspects really well in the Dreamwalker series, and the sunnier aspects on the fishing industry in her Seafood Capers Cozy Mysteries. So I want to start.
Go ahead. I'm nodding my head. That's great.
I want to start out talking about the Dreamwalker series because that's my personal favorite. Do you have a vision when you start out writing a series, or do you take them one book at a time? Do you have a series arc that you follow?
I don't actually intend to have a series arc. I know that I need character growth. And so basically, for me, the origin of a story is some inciting incident, something that just makes me so interested I can't not write about it. And from there, I just develop the characters, and I figure out, based on their personality, what's the biggest kind of jeopardy they could get in. And then I want to say that I'm a plotter, but I really am a pantser, and I pantsed the Dreamwalker series, whereas I haven't always done that on my other books. I'm sort of a hybrid, but on that one, I just wrote without a net, and it was one of the most scariest, funnest things I've ever done. So let's see. What I intended with that series was to accommodate my muse, which had once again wandered from any sort of genre lineage that I wanted to be in. I started in romantic suspense. I accidentally wrote dystopian. I wrote cozy. But then suddenly events in my life made me want to write a paranormal. At that time, I had just become aware of Charlene Harris's Sookie Stackhouse series. And of course, they had immortalized that in the True Blood series on HBO. And I thought about if I could write something paranormal. And like you, I love your paranormal stories too, Carla, because I don't want to say they're the gentler side, but there's not like things that pop out of the closet at you. You kind of know what's coming, through the buildup of suspense. But there's not too many horrific surprises, which I love Sookie Stackhouse and everything she did, but they were vampires and werewolves and witches and all the things that I've been scared of my whole life. But for my paranormal series, I got to define my own story world. And that's actually very key to being a good paranormal author, is staying true to your story world. And you do a great job of that with your series.
Thanks.
Let's see.
Well, you do a really good job of that, too. I mean, we followed, and it's interesting how you're talking about character growth, because Baxley Powell really does go from In the first book, kind of a novice into the whole thing, she takes over for her dad, and then as she grows, you get to see the changes in her in every book, and I enjoyed the journey.
It was nice for me too, because in a way this was there were 7 books in the series, so it wasn't quite all of the stages of grief, but this story was inspired by a sister who died what I consider very early now at 65. She was older than me, but I am now her age, so I also wonder if that's going to happen to me. But anyway, that's beside the whole point of the story. She had a form of Alzheimer's where her mind was still sharp. She was still our family historian, but she just forgot how to move. And I'm one of 5, and there was 4 sisters and a brother, so all of us sisters took turns taking care of Carol. So her care for the last really 2 years of her life was intensive. Not that she was bedbound or anything, but somebody was always making sure she had food or dinner or was taking her to the doctors, that sort of thing. And so she really just, as adults, you drift apart from your siblings. But in that instance, we all drew so close together, not just our individual relationship with our sister Carol, but our bond together as sisters, uniting and working together, and making it just was such a deep family bond. That's all I can say. It was already there, but this just fostered it. And so when she passed, I just needed to write about this woman that had all these struggles. And it really helped me with my grief. And to build the story world, like you, I tapped into some elements of mythology. I also used my Christian faith, some of the things I remembered from C.S. Lewis, and of course, I've been to a lot of church kind of things, and they talk about the Holy Spirit and the afterlife and revelations, and I have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. That's really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to construct something where somebody who was just lost, she was doing her best to get by, but just lost, that she could go out and help, and she could contribute. It's almost, something that would be a nice journey for someone during the pandemic, even though we're coming out of that. But it's just some of those feelings I had in the pandemic of just not being able to do as I liked, and of being unable to go and not see my children and grandchildren for almost 2 years now. Mm-hmm. All that stuff was just rattling around in my head. I wouldn't say it was churning. It was pretty much rattling. But I just love building Baxley character, and I love the different aspects. I tried to, and I broke all the rules that are what we have in the body of knowledge of psychics in our country that's kind of generally accepted. Mm-hmm. Generally, if you have like one talent, like if you're clairaudient or something else, you could only hear voices or see things or get something by touch. Well, I decided to heck with that. Baxley was going to get a new superpower every book, which made it really fun for me. Every book was fresh. Mm-hmm. And I just approached every book fresh. And, if you're not really a pantser and you try writing without a net, that is more terrifying to me than any vampire or werewolf. So I just made it work. And every day, I would wake up early to come in here and write because it was just so much fun. I just love writing that series.
Yeah. Well, and for people who don't know, a pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of your pants. And I write that way myself. I try more to have outlines where I can, but for instance, my most recent book was completely by the seat of my pants, and it turned to, for me, it was like a nightmare, because then everything you make up, you have to go back and fix later, and
yeah.
it can be a challenging journey, but it's also a lot of fun because you discover things along the way, along with your characters.
Yes, I'm having that in a current series I'm starting, and I'll just say just a smidge about that. Is that I gave my sleuth an extra ability, but then I didn't use it. And as I got done, I'm like, well, gosh, if she can go invisible, I need her to do it, So, yeah, keeping all that stuff straight and just being true to your story world rules. That's the kind of advice I would give for any writer in any genre.
Right. So, you were mentioning, that you'd lost a sister, and that's something that you and I both share too. And it's very difficult when you lose somebody so young. And I was very close to my sister, and it was a relationship that we developed. She was the oldest, and I was the youngest. So I know that enters into my stories a little bit. Would you say, well, you have said, I think, that there's a very distinct sense of family in the Dreamwalker books. You've got the single mom fighting for her daughter, the father whose footsteps Baxley follows, the mother who knows how to restore their energy. And I'm guessing that this experience with your sister is what helped you create that tight family bond?
Yes, and there's also, as writers, we like to try and fix things, or at least that's one of the things I do.
Yeah.
I had a very close family for many years, and then my parents divorced when I was in 7th grade. And so I think in some ways I was just trying to write the perfect family, but a family with so many flaws that they were not my family, but different types of flaws is what I'm trying to get at. But people who are just generally nice, like my parents just finally just didn't get along. After so many years in children, they just grew apart, and there wasn't any fixing that.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for fiction.
Yes. I got to tell you, there's days that it's easier just to, especially during this last year of the pandemic, as you mentioned, it's easier sometimes to just disappear into our books than it is to have to deal with all the noise that's going on in the world.
Yes, I was very thankful for books, and I actually have a rule that I don't read a new book when I'm writing a book. So I will only read books I've previously read, because otherwise I start writing like the person I'm reading.
I've done that too.
So I have to, store up a whole bunch of books and read them real quick when I'm doing an editing phase, which is about 3 months of the year for me. And it takes me about 6 months from when I actually start envisioning a story to getting a first draft cranked out. That's 6 months for that.
Okay.
So just my Kindle is full of stories. Let me just say that.
So, again, you had the Rose character in the book, who's the anti-hero. Or how did you come up with her character?
Well, I think there's a snake in the Garden of Eden. There's always the best way to have a character foil to show someone's goodness is to show someone bad. Mm-hmm. And throughout the series, Rose confides early on that she's undercover. Mm-hmm. But then she does so many bad things to Baxley. Like in one story, the dadgummit where she suspends her over a fire and spins her. That's just dumb, because she's going to hurt Baxley. But of course she was in complete control. But Rose does bad things. And at some point I decided I wanted Rose to, actually be who she said she was. Mm-hmm. At first I was going to make her the absolute villain. And when I got to the very last book, I really didn't know who was going to be the big villain. I just knew that with each book, I felt like as she had more powers, then the people she had to go up against had to be more powerful. So, and that way I knew it had to be like global. So I really had my work cut out for me and all done with it, which was the final book. And that book came out last August, almost a year ago, not quite.
Mm-hmm. She reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you've seen the series Lucifer.
I have not seen that show.
Well, he's the devil and he lives on earth. He's the devil incarnate. And the thing of it is he's an angel that was cast from heaven, and he resents the fact that he was cast from heaven. And so Rose reminds me a little bit of him. He does bad things, but he does them with good intentions, I guess you want to say. So You're never sure whether you want to love him or hate him. And it's interesting. Her development is a little bit like that you're never quite sure if she's a good guy or a bad guy.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I haven't seen that, because I don't want anybody to think that I cheated on my story. Rose was totally unique. I just envisioned her and, hoped I was channeling something original.
So I'm going to move backwards then into your dystopian books. What prompted you to write those?
Many people don't know that I started out life as a scientist. And my work was in the field of aquatic toxicology. Mm-hmm. And I worked in several different areas of science before I landed in that one. But that's the area of science I spent the most time studying. And we were really concerned with drinking water. And my protagonist in my dystopian series is also a research scientist. And he is so good with computers and stuff, but he is challenged to find out what's happened to the world's drinking water in the first book. And anyone who's a scientist knows, you can't water solid, liquid, and a gas, but you can't get rid of it. It's here on the planet unless, there's like a giant hole in the atmosphere and we lose it all. So I wanted at some point, and people were asking me all the time, why don't you write what you know? Write a book about a scientist. And I'm like, oh, nobody's going to read that. And so I just sort of floated around an idea in my head. And I actually thought I was still writing a mystery. Well, except for the part that, he was an alien and didn't know it. Until I got to the end, I had just advanced a timeline 50 years because I wanted to fix some things and to make some other things worse. Thank goodness I didn't envision a pandemic. That would have, I wouldn't have known, the depths that people would sink to in a crisis like that. But I still have like a very frantic world, just like we were all pre-pandemic, where everything was going fast. And there were concerts and this and that and the other. And, everybody was trying to get as much as they could out of life for themselves and their family. I don't know if people are back to that yet. I'm still sort of on the slow boat checking out. Am I going to eat in a restaurant? Or is there one person in there or 10, Mm-hmm. So, I really liked writing about that scientist character. And I felt like that series I also wrote in third person so that the robot and the bad guys and others could have a point of view. So it's interesting, the Baxley Powell series for me, the Dreamwalker series, I knew that had to be first person. I didn't want to have anybody else's perspective. Mm-hmm. But within the realm of that story world, the Guardian series, which was my dystopian novel, I wanted to have different viewpoints. And that really helped because some of my characters, and I don't know, maybe other people write just as whack job characters as I do, but I like to have, I'm very used, one of my tropes is like a character who's barely holding it together and everybody around her is crazy. Yeah. But she finds out that she has her own craziness and they're helping her too, or him too. That's really what I enjoy writing about. And it just makes it just so much fun.
Yeah. As much as I loved your Dreamwalker series, and the ending was very satisfying conclusion, I love how you wrapped it up.
Oh, thanks.
And I know you're working on a new series now, the Seafood Capers. What excites you about those things, that series, and the things that keep you writing the next book?
Well, I just adored writing this series. I've only got 3 in this series, and I'm putting it on hold for now, and I'll get into that a little if we have time. But after writing a series and all done with it, the last Dreamwalker series really wiped me out, mm-hmm. Because I felt like in my mind I had closed off everything. I didn't want to write about, and a lot of people wrote to me and said, don't make this about a child, and, I don't want to read a paranormal story with small children in it. It's just not right, and I respected that, and I was actually pretty much all done with it myself. And I wanted something light and sunny. And I still have an area of perfect terror in this book because it's about a caterer who loves to cook. Mm-hmm. And I really do not love cooking, and I'm not a cook. So writing about this was just as scary to me as writing about, selkies and energy vampires and ghost dogs. which were all in the Dreamwalker series.
Right.
I got the idea for this series when I answered a call for a short story anthology, which was set in another author's story world. Carolyn Haynes, who's a Southern author, has a detective cat named Trouble. And a friend of mine was editing the anthology, and she invited me to submit something. And so I created this new character just for that, thinking it was just kind of a one-off. But then once I wrote the story, River Holloway really wanted her own series, and I could not get her to leave me alone.
I know how that works.
So yeah, and the best way to jump into a new series is to either have the sleuth or a family member or the best friend, somebody that's just so important to their life that it makes sense that somebody that has no training would try to help solve a crime. And
Right.
I have always loved the ocean and going to the beach. And so I got to explore a lot of that. Also, there's a part of me now that can't spend as much time at the beach because of sun issues. So I just have her enjoying the woods as well, because I actually like the woods. I live in a very wooded community, so I'm able to actually get out and walk when I remember, get up from the computer. I talked in a circle there. I just love writing about River. She is on a character arc herself where it's her and her brother, because the mom has died and her brother's kind of been a little bit of a hot mess his whole life, and he's just finally getting his act together. It doesn't quite do it in the first book, which is Seize the Day, and that came out through Henry Press, and that was a lot of fun getting that book out. But during that same time period, my publisher underwent sort of a massive downsizing, and they released the last two books in the series that I had already written. So with the Dreamwalker series, I had already experienced the difficulty of placing an ongoing series with a new publisher. So I opted to indie publish those two books myself. And I don't really say that I'm a terrific editor, formatter, or cover artist, but I have done all of that with backlist books. So I just put them out, and I was very pleased with them. They came out to very nice reviews, and people want more in that series. It's just, I thought I would try one more time in a different story world to be able to be more, do promotion at a different level, to be at a different level of publishing. And I don't mean that as in one's better than the other, but it just comes with different wheels and gadgets. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started something new, and I'm going back to my paranormal roots for that. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. And like I say, I've got people. One of the things that I like about this series is someone who's an oddball that people picked on or shunned, or, this series is for all the people that have ever felt like they were invisible, even when they weren't.
Yeah, or they don't belong. Yeah.
Yeah, or that they were like, not really the tattooed crowd at high school, because those kids all hung together, but just kind of the loners that nobody wanted to associate with for no good reason, but, a host of, I just don't know her, I don't want to know her, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I actually was working pretty far into that series, and my critique partner said, hey, the way these two sisters communicate, they're twins. I'm like, you're right. So I have twins in Savannah in a shop that sells books, and they make their own candles and other soaps and things like that. So I'm really excited about the potential for this new series, and I'm in edits, and it was also pantsed, so that means there's a lot of rewriting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like that this series, I actually have several others for this series already planned out, that it has legs. it can walk if I want it to, or it can stay in the slow lane if I want it to. And I just, like I say, I really haven't decided how much into the fast lane I want to jump back into, but I want to give myself that option. So that's really kind of where I'm going for the future. The name for that story right now, and of course everything is subject to change, particularly if you do acquire a publisher, but I'm calling it The Wick and the Dead.
Oh, cute. Very clever name.
I've been lucky with my titles. I don't think I've had any of my titles ever changed by a publisher. So far, so good on that.
Well, harkening back to your Dreamwalkers, those titles were all interesting. And I when I first saw the titles, I thought, boy, you're talking about the low country hicks down there with the way they talk and it's just a different kind of a, speech pattern. And I'm like, wow, those are interesting titles. And I think for anybody who looks at the title that says, "Dadgummit, what kind of a story is that?" It's definitely worth your reading time.
Yeah, I was really surprised that one of the reviewers said, when you see the titles of these books, you think that there might be full of rednecks. And they said, it is surprisingly not the case, but it is definitely a different story world and one that's fun to, exist in.
Right.
So I was very heartened by that. It's, as you know, it's always great to feel like somebody gets what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't imagine them being titled anything different because, like I said, first time you see the titles and you're like, what the heck is that? And then you read the stories and it's like, but you know what? It fits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we should be looking forward then to The Wick and the Dead at some point in the future.
I sure hope so. Like I say, I'm going to, my process now is I do my own 3 months of edits, and I have, for the last 5 or 6 books now, I've hired a freelance editor to comb through and make sure that I haven't made any, ginormous mistakes or even any small ones. And she's really good at that, so that I have something very polished. And I just, like I say, I have the option of it going big or going Maggie style.
So you said you're going indie with this series.
I don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
I had an agent for the, I think I've had about 5 or 6 agents now, but okay. I don't want to get into the agent talk. As with everything in writing, people come and go. Mm-hmm. The agent I had for the Seafood Caper series, which is Seize a Day, Spawning Suspicion, and Shrimply Dead, is interested in the premise. I told her about this book, but I didn't want to sell on a partial. I didn't want that pressure. I need to go ahead for me and have the first book written.
Right.
So we'll see. Okay. We'll just see how it is. I did learn something, though, on my writing journey, is that even though I can get a book ready to turn in from nothing to polished in 9 months, once you add in the other releases and holidays and vacations, pandemics,
yeah,
I can't get a book turned in 9 months. I will never say that again. I'm going to be a once-a-year book gal. Particularly for anything that's over 70,000 words, it's just not working.
Yeah.
There's one gal I was reading for a while that wrote books that were about 55,000 words, and she was able to put out a couple of those a year, and they were paranormal, and I can't think of the name of her series, but it was Angie Fox, and I really enjoyed those. But anyway, I just don't write short. It takes me a while to get to the end. When I first started writing, and maybe you were this way too, a book was about 40,000 words, and I'm like, uh-oh, nobody's going to want that. Now I have to think of a subplot, I wouldn't think of that. I would just do the main plot all the way through. It's a learning curve to be a writer, and you really, I think, anyone that's a reader out there, I hope you appreciate that. It's like a calling, as much as a priest vocation. You have to really love it to put up with all the joy and agony that goes with it at the same time,
right,
simultaneously.
Yeah, it really is kind of a bipolar process because you're really, really excited and you write like crazy and you're like, oh, I just feel so great. And then something hits you and it's like, oh my God, I'm terrible. And you get the writer's angst sets in and you think no one's ever going to buy this and why am I wasting my time? But then something strikes you that inspires you all over again. It's like, but I have to write. I have to share this with the world because it's so exciting. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is to convey some of that excitement that we feel when we get to writing, where it's just like, oh, this is so much fun and this is so exciting and I want to share it with the world.
I feel that way too, that I like being able to talk to people and the video part is always terrifying for me because, I always feel like, my shirt will be misbuttoned or something. There's going to be some mistake I will have made, inadvertently that will make me look like the goof I am. But I just really enjoy connecting with readers and other writers in any form because it's energizing for me. When we finish this, I'll be back at editing and I'll be fired up.
Yeah, I feel that same way. And that's why I wanted to, I was hoping to start bringing other authors in so we could talk about it because it does. The more you talk, the more you build your energy. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are you calling the podcast? Does it have a name?
Yes, it's called Book Backstory.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so you get the story behind the story, and like I said, the energy behind the story. It's like what keeps us going, what makes us excited about these stories.
Yeah, I like that because it's more about the process and it helps maybe readers get a different perspective of how a book evolved.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think that's all I got for you today. Do you have anything else that you'd like to tell my listeners?
Yeah, buy my books and Carla's. We love to have readers, connect with us through our websites. And of course, we like people to read our newsletters too. So I'm sure if you just visited our site, you'd find something great fun to read. My books are in print and digital. I don't have any audiobooks at this time, but I'm just so happy to have this new opportunity to reach out to people. Thank you, Carla, for inviting me.
Oh, sure. And you can find Maggie at www.maggietoussaint.com. I've got the link. I'll have the link in the notation section of the podcast. So you should be able to find her. And I hope everybody buys your books.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.